Good morning. My name is Blake Walsh. I'm an employee benefits consultant here at Walsh Duffield, and thank you for joining today's webinar entitled The New Normal, Strategic Staffing and Retention Approaches for Employers, presented by Adrian Schley, Senior Director of HR Strategic Placements at HRWorks. This is the first webinar of our Walsh Duffield's Employee Benefits and All That Jazz series. It takes place on the heels of our in-person seminar from June 13th, in which we hosted 120 plus clients and prospects alike. And for more information on upcoming webinars, you can visit our website, walshduffield.com/all-that-jazz. Before I introduce Adrian, just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will share a link after the event along with slides from the presentation. This presentation is approved for one SHRM professional development credit and is pending recertification credit hours through HRCI. We will email the codes needed for those credits to all of you attendees after the webinar. And we invite comments and questions throughout. So in the Q&A box on your screen, you can submit at any point, and we will hold it for discussion at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm happy to introduce today's presenter. Adrian Schley is an SHRM certified senior HR professional with nearly 20 hours of experience in all facets of HR. Adrian's experience in human resource management spans diverse industries, supporting clients of all sizes and in a variety of sectors. In her current role, Adrian leads HRWorks direct placement services and helps clients find top quality candidates in all areas of HR. And that's from entry-level positions up through chief human resources officers. With a strong background in employee relations, compliance, and change management, Adrian brings a consultative approach to helping clients understand today's unique workforce hiring challenges. Adrian sits on the board of directors as co-chair for career services for the National Human Resources Association, Rochester chapter, serves as an HR mentor, and serves as the president of Martha Brown Middle School's Parent Teacher Student Association. A personable and enthusiastic communicator, and I can say that having only spoken to Adrian for 2 minutes, I know that to be true. Adrian is often invited to speak on talent acquisition and workforce trends. She has presented at multiple state SHRM conferences, local SHRM chapters for NHRA Rochester, Disrupt HR, and was selected as the keynote speaker for the 2022 Central New York SHRM Annual Conference. Today, Adrian will be discussing the new challenges in recruitment and what employers are doing to attract and retain employees. She will dig in on compensation reviews, ongoing check-ins, new concepts for benefits, remote and hybrid work, which we know is key today in all facets of what we do, and gathering data through employee surveys. So at this time, and having all that said, I yield the floor to Adrian.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And, extra bonus points for pronouncing my last name correctly. I am adding you to the list of, one of 5 people to do it correctly in this type of forum. So thank you. Looking forward to presenting to all of you. Have a great long history with Walsh Duffield. In my background, I do work with organizations of all sizes, all industries. And so I'm right in the thick of it with you as an HR professional myself for almost 20 years now. I have to say these last 4 years have really thrown everyone for a loop. I mean, we are used to coming up against challenges, but my goodness, the challenges that we've faced since the beginning of 2020. So I'm going to be talking with you today about a few different areas where I'll be able to help you understand to the degree possible what's next. And so I like to call it the new normal of recruitment. You'll see as we go through these slides that yes, many of these challenges that we're up against started to rear their heads during the pandemic. However, and I'll put the caveat, unfortunately, these aren't going to go away now that the pandemic is affecting our country a bit differently. So really, what is this new normal and what can we expect moving forward? I'm then going to look at some new approaches to both engagement and retention. And so really looking at now, given what we've learned over the last 4 years, looking forward at what we can anticipate based on our our new workers in the workforce. What is it that we can do to be proactive and really rise above some of the challenges that we've faced? And then I will leave time at the end for questions as well. So feel free to send in those questions as we go through this presentation. And then Rebecca is going to be reading those off to me. As I mentioned, I've been doing this for 20 years. Sadly, I do not have all the answers. That's not what I tell my husband, though. But I will, to the extent possible, be able to answer some questions for you. And if there's anything that I can't get to, I'm happy to connect afterwards and get that information for you. So let's start with, how did we get here? Many of you are still reeling, and it seems like we're up against never-ending changes. And as I mentioned, a lot of which did come through the pandemic. Well, it was truly what I like to call a perfect storm of recruiting challenges. It was really no one factor that impacted us the most, in really many different factors that happened all at the same time, some of which relating to the pandemic. The first is really, we saw a mass exodus of our boomer generation. We've known for a long time. We should have had the writing was on the wall. We should have been prepared for a slow trickling out of our boomer generation over, about a 10-year span. And instead of that, we saw a mass exodus. 3 million boomers really retired earlier as a result of the pandemic. And so there was really a large gap that we anticipated that we would fill over a period of time. And we anticipated we would fill with a different demographic of employees, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And it didn't really pan out the way that we thought it would. We also, of course, are still seeing the impacts of the economy and inflation quickly and significantly impacting wages. And so when you see that the price of milk is 4 times the amount of what it was, or thankfully eggs aren't $9 anymore, but who knows if they'll get back up there again. But as you see inflation rise that quickly, essentially your employees are looking to say, what's offsetting this? A cost of living or the traditional increases that I've gotten in the past are not really reflecting what I'm up against, trying to just, keep my my typical cost of living in check at this point. We also saw a significant impact to supply chain shortages, which then impacted services. We have 44 million jobs right now that are in supply chain, and there are they have a 6.3% job openings rate, yet unemployment is only 3.7%. And so there are significantly more jobs open than the unemployment rate at this time. And so not only does this impact any of you who are within the supply chain industry, because the employees that you're able to retain are getting burned out at a quicker rate, but it also really drives that supply and demand of workers who are ready to go into that area. So we saw a real significant impact in that area. Something that we did not anticipate was the gig work economy. So we, at this point in time, have 57 million people currently working in gig work. That's about 36% of your employees right now are also supplementing their work with gig work, and they like it. What we're also seeing is that there is a large demographic of people who have left the traditional workforce and are now saying, I don't want the 9 to 5. I don't want that daily burn of working within corporate America. Instead, I'm going to choose when I work. I'm going to have a direct impact on my own income. I like the flexibility. I like the diversity of work that I can have with gig work. These jobs and people who are opting to just leave the workforce altogether and instead have a gig work lifestyle are exactly the same demographic of employees that we assumed would take over for our boomers. So, not only did we not expect the boomers to leave that quickly, we also thought that millennials and the next generation, Gen Z, would start to take up some of those roles. And that simply is not happening to the extent to which we assumed it would. And then finally, and obviously, I know any of you are in HR, finance, operations, you feel this directly, but there is just a significant amount still of trauma associated with the pandemic and burnout. Employees have always struggled with burnout, but we are seeing an increase there. Nearly half of 18 to 29-year-olds feel that they are just burned out already. And then we see women reported 46% higher levels as well. So when you take your Gen Z and you take your female employees, you're accounting for a significant portion of your workforce that are currently burned out. And that's not even referring to everyone who throughout the pandemic really started to reevaluate what's important to them. That idea of work-life balance was no longer something that they were just going to aspire to have. They were now going to demand it. It was, it made everyone take a step back and say, life is short. I need to be happy in what I do, and I'm no longer ready to be okay with things from an employment perspective that I wasn't previously. And, you couple that with the ability to go out and do 4 different types of gig work, and you have a workforce that is very different than what we were dealing with in 2019. So I often hear clients when I talk with them say, well, when we get back to normal, well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, though I often feel like I am. But when you look, I know that there's that big concern about the R word that, that there could be a recession. But when we're looking at the numbers month after month, thankfully or not, we're not seeing that. We saw job openings in March were 9.6 million, still outnumbering available workers. Employers added 253,000 jobs in April. Unemployment dipped to 3.4%, matching a new record low. It did tick up a little bit through some of these larger layoffs that you've seen, but those are primarily focused in certain industries. We're seeing across the board that we're not seeing a lot of new unemployment claims. So we've been hovering between 3.4, 3.7%, which are all historically low and definitely lower than pre-pandemic. So thus far, we're not seeing this shift back to those good old days where you could post a position and just it was great. I mean, people would apply for jobs back then. We're not seeing that yet. And again, this isn't just in HR. I work with companies of all industries, and all of them are reporting that they're just not seeing as many active job seekers. So what are employers doing? When we look across the board at some of the approaches that employers are taking to offset this, it really is this ongoing, how do we make ourselves different? How do we differentiate ourselves from what others are doing within our specific industries or even across the board? Because sometimes just doing better within an industry isn't going to help attract employees that otherwise are happy to stay in other industries. So it's really that fight for talent right now. 73% of participants in a Kaufman Hall survey said that they are implementing retention bonuses. This is primarily with employees over the first year, and then also employees who are in key positions as well, that they understand that they would not be able to attract should they go to the market. 47% are paying more for overtime hours. We're seeing a lot of this happen in healthcare, and again, some manufacturing and supply chain. Some of the company or some of the industries where we're seeing a significant difference between available talent and the number of open opportunities. They're looking at, trying to at least incentivize working a bit more. 40% are restructuring their work week to reduce commuting hours. So I will dig into this a little bit because I know that work from home is a hot topic, is going to continue to be a hot topic. But I also recognize working with certain industries that it's simply not possible for some industries to implement that. And so the industries that are saying, well, we can't offer hybrid, but maybe we can look at condensing a work week so we can take out that 1 day of gas prices and commuting, and that make that 3-day work week or work weekend more, something to attract potential employees. One of the things that I'll talk about throughout this presentation is this new, I guess not new concept, but this renewed focus on understanding the whole person with regard to what do you need to do with regard to benefits, with regard to just understanding what your employees are up against and what could be impacting their ability to get to work or their ability to be productive at work. And so in thinking about this whole person perspective, many companies are recognizing that simply the cost of either commuting or childcare can be prohibitive in getting employees in the door. And again, looking back to the pandemic, many people didn't have childcare costs because they simply couldn't send their kids into school and had to work from home, or they didn't leave their office because they didn't need to and they were able to work from home. And so recognizing that that's once again a significant cost, employers are looking at, using programs to help offset that. There are even some companies that are looking at, are there grants available that they can apply to helping their employees kind of offset some of those costs as well. And then something else that we are seeing significantly is that mental health support, again, whole person support. Mental health provider demand increased 85% from 20 to 2022, as you can only imagine why. We don't see this changing, even moving into 2023. There's just a lot of stress on a daily basis. And so employers are looking at what can we do to help support our employees with regard to mental health. 91% are focusing on mental health as, more of a strategic objective, building it into their health and wellness benefits. 77% are focusing on stress management and resilience. I'll say that HR Works actually this past year implemented the Calm app, made it so that every employee could have that and use it nightly just for helping to de-stress and relax. And we've got about a 50% utilization rate right now. Not bad at all for 1 year. 74% of employers are focusing on mindfulness and meditation. Again, that Calm app has that in it as well. Others are bringing in people to the organizations and leading meditation or even doing some remote mindfulness and meditation work. So these are some of the things that employers are looking at to get creative. When we look at it, not one strategy, however, is enough to solving the problems. You really need to look at implementing a comprehensive approach. So you want to look first at how do we reduce our labor costs? We're seeing this going back to that supply chain industry. You're seeing a lot of innovation there to then help to, they're actually at the forefront of innovation because they recognize we may not be able to solve our our supply problem with regard to people being able to do this work. So how can we think creatively? How can we innovate? The ways in which other organizations are doing that are looking at when is outsourcing possible and when does it make sense from an ROI perspective? Are there jobs that we don't have to have internally that are actually better managed externally? The same, okay, I am going to show my Gen X-ness here. I am very scared of artificial intelligence. I think I watched Terminator too many times, but I continue to read about it. I'm trying to get comfortable with it. But we are seeing that there are a lot of industries that are looking at how can they use AI to offset some of the mundane tasks. AI can be doing some of these things throughout the night that otherwise, tend to be burnout positions for humans because they're so redundant in nature. And so is AI an option? Go to somebody reputable. I don't need any Terminator moments here, but it may be something that you want to look into. And then we're going to have a whole section on this, but assessing, adjusting, understanding your employees, understanding where their strengths are, and cross training, really maximizing the return on investment in your employees by investing in them. So much more to come on that piece. And then, what we're talking about today, on top of that, you want to prioritize retaining employees in order to lead to more stable staffing. And so not just, we've talked about retaining and retention for a long time, but is this part of your strategic initiative? Are you looking, in a way that is very much focused on the data and reviewing? Are you having your senior leadership truly invested in understanding how retention is going to ultimately make or break your organization? Now is the time to do that. I won't dig in too much because this is a whole webinar in and of itself, but we'll talk about the fact briefly that, when we talk about retention, you need to parse it down to demographics. You need to parse it down to location. You need to parse it down even into in-office, hybrid, and remote engagement, because those tactics differ very much. And again, won't go too far into this, but believe it or not, your remote employees are often the ones that are least engaged. And while they're able to recruit very quickly for a remote position, we're also seeing a significant amount of turnover with remote employees as well. So again, this is a whole webinar in and of itself, but recognize that what your in-office versus hybrid versus remote employees may need to stay with the organization are often very different. And then obviously the whole purpose of why we're talking today is that wage transparency laws, engaging, retaining your younger workers, and then the next workers to come, and all of the employment complexities simply with the differences between state, federal, local law is only going to make this more difficult. Again, bearer of bad news. But because of that, this needs to be a strategic objective. So let's talk about that new normal of recruitment. So I do love reputable surveys. I think they're very important. But what I also like is to hear from the people who are doing the job. And so let me tell you a little bit about what I am seeing directly from candidates that I am working and trying to recruit out from one position into another position, or even people who are unemployed, who are still acting in a way that's very different. They've got different thoughts and different considerations when they are trying to look at what the next opportunity is for them. So first off, candidates, as I mentioned, are still largely looking for remote or hybrid work. I still tend to have about 90% of candidates saying I would really strongly prefer hybrid or remote. It's a little bit less than it used to be. I'm having very frank conversations with candidates that are looking for full remote work, because we're also seeing that full remote work is not as available as it was 2 years ago. There's actually 6 candidates for every 1 full remote work position. And so it almost flips the table a little bit to where when a company is looking for remote work, they can really ensure that they are finding that strongest possible talent, because there are a lot of people out there looking for that. Candidates are now a little bit more inquisitive about the history of the position and the company. We have many candidates who will see that a position has been opened a number of times over the past couple years. They want to know why. What's different about this role now that I'll be successful where the person who was in it previously was not. And so I'm having those conversations with my clients. This hasn't worked the last 4 times. We need to think differently. We need to look at the role. We need to recognize, can someone be set up for success in this role? And how can we explain that to a strong candidate? They're also looking at the company's history. If the company has had some significant layoffs, if they've been in the news for not all the best reasons, candidates are paying attention to that. So again, sometimes that's not something that we can, avoid. But what you can do is be ready to anticipate that question. With one client that I have, they're in an industry that is seeing a lot of turnover, a lot of volatility. So we came right out with any strong candidate and showed essentially the growth trajectory of the company, that they had not had any turnover, any layoffs through the past 5 years, that they are making smart strategic moves. So being ready with those stories to be able to explain what has been happening with the company or the industry is even more key. Candidates are still quickly moving out of the market. I can't even hold on to people for more than a couple of weeks at this point. So there's still that need to move quickly through your process, but candidates are still open to new offers, even if they have an offer on a table. I just helped one client to move quite quickly because a candidate let me know, I received an offer. It's fine, but I'm still really interested in this other role. I helped the client. We moved very quickly to kind of get through the last stages, because candidates want to make that best decision for them. And sometimes they'll wait, even if they have an offer on the table, for the opportunity that really aligns with what they're looking for. And that's really kind of related to this next one, which is newly placed candidates are still open to new opportunities. I have candidates who have reached out to me after taking a new role a month and a half in and said, Adrienne, this is not the job that I was promised. It was not in alignment with what we talked about. Is that opportunity that you talked to me about still open? And so, we see that if the onboarding, if that alignment is not there, candidates are recognizing that we're still in a strong job market and they can quickly jump into a new role. And don't forget, offers don't stop coming in as you are onboarding people. Companies will still send in offers. And so that need to really focus on that onboarding and initial engagement is so important. This is another one we'll dig in a bit more on, but candidates are asking about and want a full understanding, not just of what the offer is, but what are you doing moving forward with regard to ongoing increases? What's happening from a professional development standpoint and overall cross-training development opportunities? Your candidates are not just thinking right now, they are thinking from here for, through the next 5 to 10 years, what is it that I can expect? And they won't make a decision until they recognize that there's been some thought put around that and that you have a program in place. And then this last one, this has always been the case, but we're seeing it more. Candidates will step out mid-stage. It could be a great offer, great benefits, great compensation. If they have a bad interaction with someone who is within the hiring process, especially that manager, if they're not feeling that this is the right matchup between them and either coworkers, the company, or the manager, they'll step out. And they'll also talk to everyone about that process on all forums. So we'll talk a little bit about social media in a bit, but just know your candidates are talking. So no surprise here, compensation continues to play a large factor in whether or not a potential candidate is going to be attracted to your role. Yet, even with the impending changes coming in September, we've done a survey. We see that less than 50% of employers we surveyed are not consistently benchmarking their positions. 65% are not yet advertising their salary when hiring. That's fine, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then 60% have not conducted a pay equity analysis. So we know that compensation is one of the number one determining factors in whether or not someone is going to join and stay with your company. And yet employers aren't taking this seriously. They're not looking at this again as a business strategy and ensuring that they understand what the competition is doing or how they're doing internally. This is a problem. Not going to dig in on this. Hopefully you've been to many webinars about this already. I will at the end of our presentation have some links to a free webinar series that I did along with our compliance team and our compensation team, talking about all the changes that are coming up. But just keep in mind when we talk about compensation that September 17th is that unmagic number for many of you that you've got to be ready for New York State's wage transparency laws. So again, not going to dig in on this, but I do have that webinar at the link at the end, and you're welcome. Those are free and available to you. So as I mentioned earlier, we could do a whole training on just why to consider remote work or how to consider remote work, how to engage remote versus hybrid. But I want to just point out the fact that in some cases, I am seeing clients who otherwise could consider remote work that are saying, nope, we've just never done it. We're not going to consider it. And I want employers to think about, is this something that we would have the ability to, meaning there is some flexibility if we thought creatively. Your statistics here present opportunities. 78% of remote workers say that money would not impact their decision to return to an in-office environment. And almost 1/4 of workers, 24%, would take a pay cut to continue working remotely. Now, am I saying to cut the pay of your remote workers? No, I am not. But maybe when you're looking at your compensation philosophy and structure, is that something that you can factor in from a base comp perspective, that that's worth a certain percentage of an overall salary to be able to offer that, which would then offset that compensation cost for you? Maybe something to consider. We also see, of course, this is probably not going to be any surprise, that there's 25% less turnover, 33% faster to hire, 21% would give up vacation time. Coming from me, do not take away their vacation time. Go back to the burnout piece, please give them their vacation. But it's important to take note that, employees are open to looking at a different package when they're afforded the ability to work either remotely or in a hybrid nature. Some of my employers are opting once a month, literally one day a month, being able to do it. The employees I talk to say it's so important to them and they appreciate that. Some are opting for hybrid schedules that are only seasonal. So we know this is our downtime. We'll allow it hybrid, but only during these months. Some are opting for hybrid split between divisions so that most of the company is there, but then one division may have hybrid for a specific month. And then others that can't do it are at least being very clear in the recruiting process. This is not designed as a hybrid role. However, we are flexible. If you have an appointment, if you know that there's a particular day where you would be more productive working at home, we'll consider that. So even just that understanding of flexibility, that making that as this is a part of our culture. We're not saying that this will be hybrid on an ongoing basis, but we consider the flexibility as something that we'll be able to do with our employees. Even that is enough for many of the candidates that I speak to. So just the major point to drive in here is think creatively. That all or nothing approach, when it possibly is an option, is something that is not good from a competition perspective. So let's talk about some of these new approaches to engagement and retention. So again, HR Works did a survey. You see here, 1, 2, 3, attracting and retaining top talent, employee engagement, compensation structures. Those are the 1, 2, 3 concerns for all employers that we surveyed. And ironically, they're all related to each other as well. So again, this just pushes that need to ensure that you've got a deliberate approach to and tying all of these pieces together. I had mentioned earlier, compensation is a huge piece of it, but the good news is it's not all of it. And I'm speaking to you, my nonprofits, my smaller companies. I know it's hard to compete against larger employers when it comes to just compensation, but what you can do again is look at what are the benefits that we're able to offer that can help offset maybe a lower compensation, or if we're not able to lead the market, are we able to offer some benefits that we know are particularly attractive to our largest segment of workforce? We see a lot of themes here. Flexible work arrangements. Remember, flexible work isn't necessarily hybrid. It's thinking creatively. Um, uh, uh, Career development opportunities, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in the next few slides. Health and wellness benefits. Again, all of this is going back to some of the things that we're seeing competitors already putting into place here. Mental health support, child care support, looking at that whole employee perspective and looking creatively to see what benefits can we put in place, what programs can we put in place that sets us above some of our competitors. When we talk about compensation philosophy, as I said, our hand is getting pushed a little bit because we do have the wage transparency law coming up in September, but it's always been a good idea to have a strong compensation philosophy. It can truly be used as a competitive advantage. As I mentioned earlier, being able to say to candidates, here's what we're offering and here's what we're going to do, or here's what we have done across the board moving forward, that in and of itself is what candidates are looking for. It also helps you to account for unplanned market changes as well. If you are thinking ahead with regard to what are we seeing come down the line? Where do we see any potential threats with regard to our industry? Where do we see that there could be a shortage of a particular set of employees that would then drive up the salaries? So example, nurses. Nurses are going to be retiring in large, segments over the next 5 years. Healthcare organizations should be ready that is going to then increase the salary for nurses. HR as well, data analysts, employee engagement strategists. These roles are going to, DEI as well. These roles are going to get harder and harder to find talent that can fit those positions. So make sure to offset that with your budgeting and understanding that that's going to impact salaries. Consider implementing planned promotion periods. We have a client who is doing this, and every year they know exactly when it's coming. They know how it's going to impact their budget. Their employees and managers understand when it's coming and how to account for the increases. And not only do your employees like it, but it helps even from a budgeting perspective. So again, not only is this something that you need to do simply to be ready for some of the changes, but it's a smart business decision as well. I mentioned earlier, parsing out your data when you're looking at what your employees are looking for, particularly when it comes to benefits. This is more important than ever. What your employees don't want is just simply what the other company down the street is doing. What they want to know is you have listened to what we are asking for. And even if you're not able to do it, at least they know that you are making some progress towards addressing some of their wants, some of their needs. You don't have to develop this from the ground up. There are many different surveys out there that are very reputable. Best companies to work for, great places to work. They are cost effective. They provide you the information necessary on how do we do this well, how do we roll it out. And then when you get the survey data back, it really digs in on your demographics, on the location, on the type of work that they are doing. It really provides you an in-depth look at what your employees want and how that could differ based on a number of factors. HR Works has been doing this for, I think, this is our 13th year on best companies to work for. We did this to understand what employees wanted. We didn't do it for the nice fancy label, though that's pretty cool. But we really did it to be able to have some data to then make data-driven decisions. And so through the years, we report on what did we hear? What are we going to work on? What can't we do right now? Like tuition reimbursement. A small company like us just can't do that, but we're investing in professional development. So we have made changes every year. We report on it. We report on what we can't do. And it has not only helped us to improve and continue to improve retention rates, but it's helped with a culture of transparency as well. Making sure to be out there with what we're hearing and acknowledging it helps from that transparency perspective, which is something that your employees across the board are looking for. I'm sure many of you HR people here are just like shaking your hands at me, maybe throwing things at the computer, because all of what I'm telling you to do right now absolutely takes work. Anyone outside of HR, buy your HR people coffee or chocolate or whatever, maybe, ask them, because we're talking about database decisions here. There is a lot of work that's been done, but still a lot of work that needs to be done as well. But the future is engagement, and who is best to engage your employees but your HR staff. So first, do you have enough staff? Are those roles clearly defined? Consider doing a SWOT analysis. Do you need more talent? Is there more training needed? As I mentioned earlier, there's going to be particular roles within HR that we see based on many surveys that have come out. 3 of the top 5 of all growing positions in the United States, these are not just HR, all growing positions are HR, data analytics, employee engagement strategy, and DEI manager. Those are the top 3 growing. And so you are going to recognize that those salaries will likely increase as we start to have more companies tap into that. So invest in your HR, because ultimately they are going to make or break whether or not you're able to help and support and be aligned with the needs of your employees both now and moving forward. One of the things that I would love to see as well is investing specifically in a segment of HR that has really gone through the ringer over the past year. So I'm talking about talent acquisition. We have seen a wave of everybody needs talent acquisition to all of a sudden everybody is no longer in need of talent acquisition. Not only do those kinds of mass layoffs of talent acquisition impact a company's brand, but it's a loss of a potential there as well. Recruiters have some great skills. They connect well with people. They are seen as typically friendly and a good resource. They understand what an employee wants. They understand kind of what the expectation was of that employee. Take the opportunity to look at any of those, the gaps in your HR and see, can we cross train our recruiter so that if there is a lull in hiring, we can have them working in these areas. They are prime candidates for engagement and onboarding because your new employees already have that connection with them. So look at what opportunities are there. It's also time, I've mentioned being creative and being innovative. That is what competitors who are doing well are doing. So hire internally, stack your own deck, look at developing that succession training, your cross training, your professional development. These are things that every company aspires to do, but they don't really do because it does take work. Well, go back to investing in HR. But this is going to be something that we can't just talk about anymore. It has to be something that, again, is a strategic objective, not only to help offset some of the difficulties that you're going to have with unexpected turnover, but your younger generations, your Gen Z and your millennials, they don't just want upward movement. That's not necessarily what they want. They want cross training. They want to know what is happening in other organizations. Their path is not necessarily linear, and it's important for you to recognize that and then determine how can we create a pathway that is going to keep our employees with us when that is a desire of theirs. As I mentioned earlier, lots of boomers jumped out of the market, but guess what? Many are trying to re-enter the market and they are being discriminated against across the board. I talk with so many candidates who are over the age of 55 that are saying, I can't get anyone to look at my resume. As soon as someone meets with me, they're not interested. I am ready, able, willing to learn new jobs. I've got a lot of time left to contribute. And I've told them, take only include the last 10 years, get your foot in the door at this point. So at the same time, we're saying we don't have enough employees. We're also not providing opportunities to employees who have a different work type or different work. Some people have said ethic. We've got some real opportunity to bring in older workers who are ready, willing, and able to be trained in other areas. I've already talked about mentorship and training programs. I won't dig in too much on that because I want to allow some time for questions. Instead of tuition benefits, think about tuition forgiveness as well. Many of your younger employees are entering the workforce, inundated with student loan debt. So is this something that you can potentially provide? Internship programs as well have always been very important, but now perhaps more important than ever. And then, sorry, again, going back to the Gen X here, but get giggy with it. Your younger employees love gig work. Well, what is it about it that they love? They love the flexibility. They love the diversity. They love that impact on their own salary. What can you do with your positions that allow it to feel or kind of reflect some of those characteristics of gig work that has attracted 36% of employees at this point? So if you can do that, if you can start to reflect that, then you're going to be more likely to be able to attract and retain employees who like that type of work. Last piece I'll say here is, if you have not yet paired your marketing people with your HR people, do it right now. There is going to be a continued need to focus on your company's brand. All of these employees that you have had, either currently or who have left, are talking on social media, either positively or negatively. Do you know what's happening on Glassdoor or some of the secret forums like Fishbowl, and there's a whole slew of others? Have you had some pretty significant layoffs in the past, or something that has impacted your company that may not look good to the public? That has an impact on your future recruiting and retention success. It's also important, every single internal communication, the way in which you market yourselves externally to try and get people to buy your product, do that internally as well. Remind your employees of what it is that makes working with you great. And the best people to work on that are HR and marketing combined. So as I mentioned, this is also something that I'm going to see is very important moving forward, pairing marketing and HR together. What's next? I'm going to go through this quickly because I want to leave time for some questions here. A continued focus on DEI and inclusivity, prioritization of the mental health, 4-day work weeks. Yeah, quite possibly if we're seeing those compacted work weeks, that could now start to trickle out across different industries. And of course, we're only ever going to see more complexity around federal and state laws. And we are starting to see an uptick in labor organization as well. But as I often talk with HR professionals, in many cases, employees are not moving to organize if they feel that a company is otherwise addressing their needs and responding to their needs. And so lots to come. I don't have a crystal ball that predicts the future, but I hope that some of the pointers that I've given you today, some of the information that I've given you today can help you to prepare for what can inevitably be more of the unexpected, but at the same time, really focus on investing in the people who are helping to make you successful. So with that said, and let me stop my share here, and I will, oh, no, I stopped the share and then realized that I still want to show you. There we go. As I mentioned, you should all be getting the presentation as well, but if you go to our HR Works website, you'll see a on-demand webinar series. You'll also see some free downloadable material, a state law comparison guide, how to do a job analysis, how to develop a compensation strategy. So I thought that would be helpful to have as well. So that will be in the information that is sent out. Now I'll stop the share. Rebecca, I
Thank you so much.
left time.
Well, that's great. We have had several questions submitted. As a reminder, if anyone else has a question, you can go ahead and just pop it in the Q&A box and we'll just get through as many as we can. So first one out the gate is, what is the best approach for HR managers or like team members to present their cases to company owners to commit to greater budgets and programming for employee engagement?
That's a wonderful question. And I'll say it all comes down to the numbers. Numbers are the universal language. And so it's important to really dig in on where are we seeing that our largest area of concern is and show the metrics on that. You'll want to benchmark as well. If this is a large area of concern, but it's really kind of across the board and it's everybody's largest area of concern, but there are other areas where you might be able to, that term low hanging fruit. Sometimes if you're able to start small and have those quick wins, then you're able to build momentum towards investing in HR. So I would say always know where you are with regard to your biggest areas of threat, where you're struggling the most, not just saying it, not just anecdotally, but here's what we've seen over the past 3 years. Here's what we're predicting based on the research. Here's what our benchmarks are. This is a large problem, but we're not going to hit you with that yet. Let's start with this nice small one. And here's exactly what I would need to be successful. And then always provide them with a timeline as well. They're going to want to know not just that they've invested, but how has that impacted the problem at hand? So with anything, there has to be okay, we're going to check in on this at 6 months, 12 months. At 12 months, we're going to make an adjustment based on what's happened over the year.
Thank you. Do you know of any special resources to help with recruitment and retention related to 24/7 operations? Has anyone mastered how to make working on-site overnights and weekends attractive?
Oh, boy. Yeah, solving all the
That's a
world's
tough one.
problems today at 11:55. There is no magic pill on that. I think one of the issues that I've read about is that there has been a lack of attention paid to the marketing of those companies and those positions. Again, going back to marketing and HR, one of the reasons that the supply chain has really struggled is that employees don't really know what it does or how it helps the United States or why it's so important. And so I would say, because you're up against a bigger hill there, because it is tough to attract those types of employees that are open to that, take that comprehensive approach. First of all, look at how can we really market our company and what we do and why is it important to the community. Talk to your overnight employees. Why do you do this? What is it about this work that keeps you with us? It could be that that actually works well with regard to their lifestyle. So the more that you can gather information on the employees that are working with you, both in why they stay, but also what will keep them to stay. So I would say start there, and then also focus on, one of the first few slides there had, more time for overtime. You could do more time, more money for shift differentials, condensed work weeks. I would say, look at all of that, but first talk to your employees.
Thank you. When it comes to DEI, are there any best practice suggestions for HR managers? Our office is fortunate to have a DEI committee that meets regularly, but transitioning those discussions to HR metrics remains gray.
Absolutely. So I would say, first of all, become a subject matter expert to the extent possible. And so that means sitting in on all of those committee meetings as well, looking at getting any training and certification in that area. Even outside of that, participating in community organizations that are focused on equity across the board. Here in Rochester, I just sat in on, I got to pull up, a group that I plan to participate in. I'm having a hard time using my brain right now because we just got done exploring racism group. And it is a group of individuals who are, community leaders who are just trying to ensure that they understand a bit more. There's a cohort associated with it to where they'll go through the year and work together. HR professionals, you should be committed to this from a whole person perspective so that you can really recognize the challenges that that your employees are up against. And again, it comes back to authenticity. Not everybody is equally as invested. And so do you have someone within the HR team who is passionate about that as well from a personal perspective? That could be the perfect person for, transitioning that and relating it to HR.
Thanks. I don't know if Blake's trying to tell me that we're at our time, but I'm going to squeeze in one more question. How can a company go about addressing and ideally improving its brand, specifically with regard to social media?
Oh, yeah. So there's kind of a twofold approach. One is if you have an internal marketing expert, really pairing with them to address, first of all, know what's out there. As I mentioned, you've got Glassdoor, you've got Fishbowl, you've got LinkedIn, you've got Google reviews. So where are we being reviewed? Know where that is first. And then partnering internally with your marketing expert on how to address this. What I don't want to see, well, first, the worst case scenario is you address it in the wrong way. I've seen companies that come back as accusatory to employees who have left, negative reviews, or they deny everything. And that is worse, quite honestly, than not saying anything. So don't do that. Not saying anything, not the best, but it's better than the other. Ideally, you are addressing consistently with your marketing person on ways that you can focus on continuous improvement and thanking people for that that input. One other alternative, if it's a lot to do with, partner with a PR firm. They are very skilled in how to help to shift that brand as well. There's a lot more on that, again, a whole webinar, but I would say even having that, standard response to addressing some of the, the chatter that's out there is key.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
We're up against noon, but Adrian, thank you. That was fantastic. I think there's a lot of sobering content, but also reason for excitement is we're in a new era of employee engagement and hybrid workforce. There's a lot to rally around here. And if you're available, we'd like it if you come work for us. That was fantastic. So I'm sure I'm not alone in that sentiment. Thank you, Adrian. It was helpful to have your expertise at our disposal today, and to say the least. And again, we will be circulating the presentation and slides to all attendees after the session wraps today. And we want to remind you that next week, our own Paula Vene-Clendenning will discuss HSAs and Medicare, the rights, the wrongs, and the rules. You can register online via our website, walshduffield.com/all-that-jazz. And any additional questions, please feel free to put them into the chat box now. We'll leave the chat open for a couple here. And thank you again for joining us today. Adrian, thanks again.
Thanks so much. Have a good day, everyone.